Rule and government among the Arabs. When talking about the Arabs before Islam, we see that it is necessary to outline the history of rule, government, sectarianism, and the religious domination of the Arabs. To facilitate the understanding of the emergent circumstances when Islam appeared, when the sun of Islam rose, rulers of Arabia were of two kinds: crowned kings, who were in fact not independent, and heads of tribes and clans, who enjoyed the same authorities and privileges possessed by crowned kings, and were mostly independent, though some of them may have shown some kind of submission to a crowned king. The crowned kings were those of Yemen and those of Sham, the family of Ghassan and the monarchy of Hira. All the other rulers of Arabia were not crowned. Rule in Yemen. In Yemen, the people of Shiva were one of the oldest known nations of the pure Arabs. They have been mentioned in records as early as the 25th century. According to excavations undertaken at or their civilization flourished and their domain spread in the 11th century. It is possible to divide their ages to the following estimation. From 1300 to 620 BC, their nation was known as Mynia, during which their kings were called Makrib Shiva. Their capital was Sarwa, also known as Khariba, whose ruins lie approx 50 kilometers northwest of Marib and 142 kilometers east of Sana'a. During this period, they began building the dam of Marib, which had great importance in the history of Yemen. Sheba had so great a domain that they established colonies within and outside Arabia. From 620 BC to 115 BC, during this era, their nation was known by the name Sheba. They left the name Makrib and assumed the designation of kings of Sheba. They also made Marib their capital instead of Sarwa. The ruins of Marib lie at a distance of 192 km east of Sana'a, from 115 BC until 300 CE. During this period, the nation became known as Himaria, the first after the tribe of Himyar conquered the kingdom of Sheba, making Ridan their capital instead of Marib. Later on, Ridan was called Zifar. Its ruins still lie on Mudawwar mountain near the town of Yarim. During this period, they began to decline in trade and power that eventually led to their downfall. Their trade failed to a great extent. Firstly, because of the Nabatean domain over northern Hijaz. Secondly, because of the Roman superiority over the naval trade routes after the Roman conquest of Egypt, Syria, and northern Hijaz. And thirdly, because of the intertribal warfare. Due to the three above mentioned factors, the families of Qatan remained disunited and scattered about. 4. From 300 CE until Islam dawned in Yemen. During this period, the nation was known as Himyariya the second, and it witnessed increasing disorder and turmoil, followed by civil rebellion and outbreaks of tribal wars, rendering the people of Yemen liable to foreign subjection and hence loss of independence. During this era, the Romans conquered Aden and even helped the Abyssinians occupy Yemen for the first time in 340 CE, making use of the constant intra-tribal conflict in Hamdan and Himyar. The Abyssinian Ethiopian occupation of Yemen lasted until 378, after which Yemen regained its independence. Little cracks began to show in the Marib Dam, which led to the Great Flood mentioned in the Noble Quran. This was a great event which caused the fall of the entire Yemeni civilization and the dispersal of the nations living therein. In 523, a Jewish ruler named Du Nawas launched a devastating campaign against the Christians of Najran. in order to force them to convert to Judaism. Having refused to do so, they were thrown alive into a big ditch where a great fire was lit. The Quran refers to this event. Cursed were the people of the ditch. This aroused great wrath among the Christians, especially the Roman emperors, who not only instigated the Abyssinians against the Arabs but also assembled a large fleet of 70,000 warriors, which helped the Abyssinian army to bring about a second conquest of Yemen in 525. Under the leadership of Irayat, he was granted rulership over Yemen, a position he held until he was assassinated by one of his army leaders, Abraha. After reconciliation with the king of Abyssinia, Abraha gained rulership over Yemen and later on deployed his soldiers to attempt to demolish Kaaba, and hence he and his soldiers came to be known as the people of the elephant. In the year 575, after the incident of the people of the elephant, the people of Yemen, under the leadership of Mahdi Karib bin Saif, Dhu Yazin al Himyari, and through Persian assistance, revolted against the Abyssinian invaders, regained independence, and appointed Mahdi Karib as their king. However, Mahdi Karib was assassinated by some of his Abyssinian servants. The family of Dhu Yazin was thus deprived of royalty forever. Kisra, the Persian king, appointed a Persian ruler over Sana'a and thus made Yemen a Persian colony. Persian rulers maintained rulership of Yemen until Badan, the last of them, embraced Islam in 638, thus ending the Persian dominion over Yemen. Rulership in Hira. Ever since Korosh the Great united the Persians, they ruled over Iraq and its neighboring areas. Nobody could displace their authority until Alexander the Great vanquished their king Darawan and thus subdued the Persians in 326 BC. Persian lands were thenceforth divided and ruled by kings known as the kings of sects, an era that lasted until 230 CE. Meanwhile, the Catanians occupied some Iraqi territories and were later followed by some Adnanians who managed to share some parts of Mesopotamia with them. The Persians, under the leadership of Ardashir, who had established the Sasanian state in 226, regained enough unity and power to subdue the Arabs living in the vicinity of their kingdom and forced the Qudaya tribe to leave for Syria, leaving the people of Hira and under the Persian domain. During the time of Ardashir, Jadima al-Wadda exercised rulership over Hira and the rest of the Iraqi desert area, including Rabia and Mudar in Mesopotamia. Ardashir reckoned that it was impossible for him to rule the Arabs directly and prevent them from attacking his borders unless he appointed one of them who enjoyed the support and power of his tribe as a king. He had also seen that he could make use of them against the Byzantine kings, who persistently harassed him. At the same time, the Arabs of Iraq could face the Arabs of Syria, who were under the hold of Byzantine kings. However, he deemed it fit to keep a Persian battalion under the command of the king of Hira to be used against those Arabs who might rebel against him. After the death of Jadima and during the era of Kisra Sabur bin Ardashir, Amr bin Adi bin Nasr al-Lakmi was ruler of Hira and Anbar. The Lakmi kings remained in rule of Hira until the Persians appointed Qabas bin Fairoz, in whose reign appeared someone called Mazdak, who called for dissoluteness in social life. Qabas and many of his subjects embraced Mazdak's religion and even called upon the king of Hira Al-Mundir bin Ma'us Sama to follow suit. When the latter, because of his pride and self-respect, rejected their call, Qabs discharged him and nominated Harith, who had accepted the Mazdak doctrine. No sooner did Kisra succeed Qabas than he, due to hatred of Mazdak's philosophy, killed Mazdak and many of his followers, restored Mandir to the throne of Hira, and gave orders to summon under arrest Harith, who sought refuge with Al Kalb tribe where he spent the rest of his life. The sons of Al Mundir maintained kinship a long time until An Noman took over. Because of a calumny born, the Persian king got angry at An Noman and summoned him to his palace. Noman went secretly to Hani, chief of Saiban tribe, and left his wealth and family under the latter's protection, and then presented himself before the Persian king, who immediately threw him into prison until his death. Kisra then appointed Iyas as king of Hira. Iyas was ordered to tell Hani to deliver Noman charge up to Kisra. No sooner had the Persian king received the fanatically motivated rejection on the part of the Arab chief, he declared war against the tribe of Shaiban. He mobilized his troops and warriors under the leadership of King Ayas to a place called Dhikar, which witnessed a most furious battle wherein the Persians were severely routed by the Arabs for the first time in history. They say that this occurred very soon after the birth of Prophet Muhammad. 8 months after Ayas bin Qubaisa's rise to power over Hira. After Ayas, a Persian ruler named Asad Haba was appointed over Hira, ruling for 17 years, after which the authority returned to the family of Lakham when Al-Mundir Marud took over. Hardly had the latter's reign lasted for 8 months when Khalid bin al-Walid fell upon him with Muslim soldiers. Rulership in geographical Syria. During the tribal emigrations, some branches of the Qudab tribe reached the borders of geographical Syria, where they settled down. They belonged to the family of Sulayya bin Halwan, of whose offspring were the sons of Dajam bin Sulay, known as Ad-Dajaima. The tribes of Quda were used by the Byzantines in the defense of the Byzantine borders against both Arab Bedouin raiders and the Persians. A king was put in charge of them. One of their most famous kings was Zayd ibn Habula. They enjoyed autonomy for a considerable phase of time that lasted from the beginning of the 1st century to near the end of the 2nd century. Their authority, however, ended up upon defeat by the Ghazanites, who were consequently granted the proxy rulership over the Arabs of Syria and had Dumatul as their headquarters, which lasted until the Battle of Yarmouk in the year 13. Their last king, Jabala bin al-Ayyam, embraced Islam during the reign of the chief of the believers, Umar ibn al-Khattab. Rulership in Hejaz. Ismail, peace be upon him, administered authority over Makkah as well as custodianship of the Kaaba throughout his lifetime. Upon his death, at the age of 137, two of his sons succeeded him, Nabeth, then Kedar. It is also said that they were opposite in order. Later on, their maternal grandfather, Mudad bin Amr al-Jurhumi, took over, thus transferring rulership over Makkah to the tribe of Jurham, preserving a venerable position. Very little authority remained for Ismail's sons, even though they held a sacred status since it was their father who built the Kaaba. Time passed without the situation of the children of Ismail changing, until the rule of Jurham declined prior to the invasion of Bakhta Nasser. The political role of the Adnanites had begun to gain firmer ground in Makkah, which could be clearly attested to by the fact that upon Bakhtanasar's first invasion of the Arabs in Dhati, the leader of the Arabs was from the Adnanites, not from Jurham. Upon Bakhtanasar's second invasion in 587, however, the Adnanites were frightened out to Yemen, while the Israelite proclaimed prophet Burkiah fled to Syria from Haran with Maad. But when Bakhtanasar's pressure lessened, Maad returned to Makkah to find none of the tribe of Jurham except Jurshan bin Jalhama, whose daughter Muana was given to Maad as wife. She later had a son by him named Nizar. On account of the difficult living conditions and poverty prevalent in Makkah, the tribe of Jurham began to treat visitors to the Kaaba poorly and seized its funds by force. This aroused resentment and hatred of the Adnanites. They, with the help of the tribe of Kuza that had come to settle in a neighboring area called Mar az-Zaran, invaded Jurham and chased them out of Makkah. Rulership was left to Kuza in the middle of the 2nd century. Upon leaving Makkah, Jurham filled up the well of Zamzam, leveled its place, and buried a great many things in it. Amr was reported by Ibn Ishaq to have buried the two gold deer of the Kaaba, together with the black stone in the Zamzam well. After sealing it up, he and those with him escaped to Yemen. Ismail's period is estimated to have lasted for 20 centuries BC. It means that the Joram stayed in Makkah for 21 centuries and held rulership there for about 20 centuries. Upon the defeat of Jurham, the tribe of Kuza monopolized rulership over Makkah, however, enjoyed three privileges. First, leading pilgrims from Arafat to Muzdalifah and during the rites at Mina on the day of sacrifice. This was the authority of the family of Al Goth. This privilege meant that the pilgrims were not allowed to throw stones until one of the men of Sufa did so. When they finished stoning and wanted to leave the valley of Mina, the Sufa men stood on the two sides, and nobody could pass that position until the man of Sufa passed and cleared the way for the pilgrims. When the Sufa perished, the family of Saad from the Tamim tribe inherited the responsibility. Second, Al Ifada, on the morning of the sacrifice, and this was the responsibility of the family of Adwan. Third, postponement of the sacred months, and this was the responsibility of the family of Tamim. Khuza'a's reign in Makkah lasted for 300 years, during which the Adnanites spread all over Najd and the sides of Bahrain and Iraq, while small branches of the Quraysh remained on the sides of Makkah, Sarim and some other families of Kinana. They enjoyed no privileges over Makkah or the sacred house until the appearance of Qusay. Qusay's father is said to have died when he was still a baby, and his mother subsequently married Rabia from the tribe of Bani Udra. Rabia took his wife and her baby to his homeland on the borders of Syria. When Qasai became a young man, he returned to Makkah, which was ruled by Hulail, who gave Qasai his daughter Hubba as wife. After Hulail's death, a war between the Quza and the Quraysh broke out, resulting in Qusay taking hold of Makkah and the sacred house. The reasons for this war have been illustrated in three versions. First, due to the influence and multiplicity of his offspring, increase of his property, and exaltation of his honor, After Hulal's death, Qusay considered himself more entitled than the tribes of Quza and Bani Bakr to shoulder the responsibility of rulership over Makkah and custodianship of the sacred house. He also advocated that the Quraysh were the chiefs of Ismail's descendants. He consulted Quraysh and Kinana to expel Khuza and Bani Bakr from Makkah, and they supported him. Second, the Khuzai claimed that Hulal requested Qusay to hold custodianship of the Kaaba and rulership over Makkah after his death. Third, Hulal gave the right of Kaaba service to his daughter Huba and appointed Abu Gubsham to function as her agent thereof. Upon Hulal's death, Qusay bought this right for a leather bag of wine, which aroused dissatisfaction among the men of Khuzai, and they tried to keep the custodianship of the sacred house away from Qusay. The latter, however, with the help of Quraysh and Kinana, managed to take over and even to expel Qusay completely from Makkah. Whatever the truth might have been, the entire affair resulted in Safa being deprived of their privileges, the evacuation of Khuza and Bakr from Makkah, the transfer of rulership over Makkah, and custodianship of the holy sanctuary to Qusay. The matter was resolved after fierce wars between Qusay and Qaza, inflicting heavy casualties on both sides. Reconciliation and then arbitration of Yamur bin Auf from the tribe of Bakr. His judgment entailed eligibility of Qusay's rulership over Makkah and custodianship of the sacred house, Qusay's absolution of responsibility for the bloodshed of Quza, and imposition of blood money on Quza and Banu Bakr. Qusay's reign over Makkah and the sacred house began in 440 and allowed him and the Quraysh after him absolute rulership over Makkah and undisputed custodianship of the sacred house, to which Arabs from all over Arabia came to pay homage. Qusay brought his king's people to Makkah and allocated it to them, allowing Quraysh some dwellings there. Nusa, the families of Safwan, Adnan, Murrah, preserved the same rights they used to enjoy before his arrival. A significant achievement credited to Qusay was the establishment of Nadwa House, an assembly house on the northern side of Kaaba, to serve as a meeting place for the Quraysh. This was very beneficial for the Quraysh because it secured unity of opinions among them and cordial solutions to their problems. Qusay enjoyed the following privileges of leadership and honor.